Bookcast, you ready? Bookcast, where you can read a chapter a day, learn some vocabulary. Let's get started right away. We can break down the story elements. Let's learn. See, I can start it off, but then it's your turn. Tricky long words, we can do it, no problem. Wanna learn the definition? Yeah, we can solve it. We gon' have fun, cause reading is the best. So tune in if you ready for a bookcast, yeah.
Hey, awesome readers! Welcome to Bookcast, a podcast for kids. I am your host, Elizabeth Langs, and I am so excited that you're back to join us for Chapter 3 of The Adventures of Pinocchio. A couple of things before we get started. First of all, if you haven't found this podcast page on Facebook, I would encourage you to do so. If you just search Bookcast, a podcast for kids, it'll pop up. And I'm going to be posting a discussion question each day for our chapter, and I would love for you and your child to engage in that question. So not only responding to it, but also responding to others. I would love for it to be a place for us to engage with each other and to hear each other's thoughts about how the book is going, what you're liking, what you're confused about, just a place for us to explore the chapters together. Also, don't forget to be using the hashtag Bookcast or tagging me on Facebook. That way I can see your journal questions, your responses, your illustrations, your thoughts, photos of you listening to the podcast, whatever it may be. I would really enjoy seeing those, so please do that. And if I have your permission, I would love to post those on my social media, so I'll get in touch with you. Lastly, I have created some resources for this book on Teachers Pay Teachers. One of them is a chapter summary that can be used with each chapter of the book as a way for your child to reflect on what they've read and what they've heard. And the other one is called STP, and that stands for Stop, Think, Paraphrase. And that is a comprehension strategy to get your child thinking about what they've read in that chapter by stopping, covering, or closing the book, thinking about what they've just read, and then paraphrasing or summarizing that. There's another one that is chapter 1 through 5 vocabulary and comprehension questions that I created. And that goes through the vocabulary in each chapter, asks some questions, and has an opportunity for your child to respond to them. And then the comprehension questions go beyond just the couple that I ask in the podcast. So definitely check those out, and I will link the website in this post. Next, we are going to review chapters 1 through 2 before we start chapter 3. Today I'm going to model it, but in the future I would like for you to either retell it orally to someone or to write it in your journal. So in chapter 1, we are introduced to Mr. Cherry, who is working in his wood shop, and as he's creating and making something, the wood starts to talk to him and he gets very frightened. And then he has a knock on the door. And that is Geppetto, which we learn has a nickname of Polenta, but he does not like that nickname. And he's asking him for some wood to create a puppet to help him make some money. And they get into a little bit of a tough during that chapter. Then in chapter 2, we see Geppetto start to make Pinocchio. And as he's creating him, he's starting to come alive. And when he's complete, Pinocchio runs away, runs into the streets, and Geppetto is chasing after him, yelling, "Stop him, stop him!" And in our last episode, we talked about how that reminds us of the Gingerbread Man, another story we've heard, and we made a text-to-text connection with that. At the end of chapter 2, we learn that Geppetto is taken to jail because while Pinocchio is running in the street, he's stopped by a police officer. And the police officer thinks that Geppetto is mistreating him, and that's why he's running away. So that's where we pick up in chapter 3. We have a couple of vocabulary words for this chapter. The first one is frightened. That means to be afraid or anxious. Advised means behaving as someone would recommend. Lamented, expressing disappointment. And the last one is remark, which is to say something as a comment or to mention. I'm going to be playing a sound effect each time I read those vocabulary words. So when you hear this sound effect, I want you to think about the word and think about the definition and what it means in the context of the story. So how is it being used in our text? So here's the sound effect for you to listen to. So when you hear that chime, that means that I've just read one of our vocabulary words, and I want you to find it, think about it, and think about how it's being used in our text. Okay, if you don't have your journal, go ahead and grab that, and we're going to get started with Chapter 3 of The Adventures of Pinocchio. This chapter is called The Talking Cricket. While Geppetto was being taken off to prison, Pinocchio ran as fast as he could across the fields to get back home. Once there, Pinocchio sat happily on the floor. All of a sudden, he heard a strange noise that made him sit up and look all around the room. "Who's that?" he asked, frightened. "Crick, crick, crick, it's me," came the reply. Pinocchio saw a big cricket crawling slowly up the wall. "Who are you?" he asked. "I'm the talking cricket that's lived in this room for more than 100 years, the cricket said. "Well, please leave. This is my room now," Pinocchio said. "I can't leave until I tell you something important, Pinocchio," the cricket said. "What can that be?" Pinocchio asked. "Boys who turn against their parents and run away from home for no reason never come to any good. They will soon be sorry for their wild ways," the cricket said. "I don't believe that. I already decided to run away from here early tomorrow. If I stay, I know I'll have to go to school just like all the other boys. I don't want to learn. I just want to have fun," Pinocchio said to the talking cricket. "You're a silly boy, Pinocchio. Don't you know that if you do that, you'll grow to be as dumb as a donkey?" the cricket added. "Oh, go away, talking cricket," Pinocchio said rudely. "You should at least learn a trade so you can make a living," the cricket advised. But Pinocchio would have none of the cricket's advice. "The only trade for me is to eat, drink, sleep, and have fun all night and day," Pinocchio said. "Poor, poor Pinocchio. I feel sorry for you," lamented. The good-hearted cricket. "You don't have a head made out of wood. You have a head made out of wood and don't know any better." At the talking cricket's last remark, Pinocchio became very angry. He threw a hammer at him. The good-intentioned cricket was suddenly done for. Okay, so that's the end of Chapter 3. What I want to talk about today is called the voice of reason. So sometimes in books there is a character who acts as a voice of reason, which is a person who influences others to act sensibly. So the character often gives a warning, which oftentimes is actually foreshadowing as to what will happen in the book. So the talking cricket is telling Pinocchio that the way he's acting is going to have consequences, and that's his warning. So we can assume that that could be foreshadowing, and that we are going to see that Pinocchio does not change his ways, and that there are consequences because of that. So an example of another character in a book that has voice of reason is in the book A Christmas Carol. So in that book there are ghosts of the past and the present and the future, and they are talking to a character named Scrooge, and they're telling him and warning him that if he continues to act this way, this is what's going to happen to him. And that is foreshadowing in the book. And we see at the end of that book that Scrooge decides to change his ways. So because of that warning and kind of that wake-up call to Scrooge, he eventually changes his ways. So maybe in our book we'll see the same thing. So be thinking about what that means to have the talking cricket act as a voice of reason. And think about if you've ever had someone act act in your behalf as a voice of reason who has warned you about something you may be doing. Or maybe you've read another book besides A Christmas Carol. So be thinking about those connections, text to self and text to text and text to world, and that will help you to engage and understand this text better. I have a couple questions for you. The first one is, what was the cricket's important message? So go back in the text and be specific with your answer. You can even cite the text by using the quotes. The second question is, how did Pinocchio want to spend his time outside of school? So go back through the text and answer that one. If you would like some more questions and to follow up with the vocabulary, check out my Teacher Pay Teacher resource for that. And also, like I've mentioned in the past, it is becoming quite pricey to run this podcast. Not only am I paying a monthly subscription fee for my podcast to be hosted, which means it's stored on a website and then that website sends it to iTunes for you to listen to. That is a monthly fee. But also, I just bought this microphone. I'm using audio software. It's my time and my energy. So if you're enjoying it, please know that if you donated to help me continue, I would so appreciate that. You can donate by going to my website, which is www.elizabethlangs.com, and there's a tab that says donations. So just be thinking about that. If you're really enjoying this and you'd love for it to continue, I would so appreciate that, and it will help me to maintain it. So think about that and know I'd appreciate it. And don't forget to find me on Facebook. Use our bookcast, a podcast for kids, in the search, and then you'll be able to find our page and also join in on the discussion. And I can't wait to see all of your posts and hopefully get to chat with you on there. So I will see you on Facebook, and I will see you next time for Chapter 4 of The Adventures of Pinocchio.
Bookcast, you ready? Bookcast, where you can read a chapter a day, learn some vocabulary. Let's get started right away. We can break down the story elements. Let's learn. See, I can start it off, but then it's your turn. Tricky long words, we can do it, no problem. Wanna learn the definition? Yeah, we can solve it. We gon' have fun, cause reading is the best. So tune in if you're ready for a